Is that Benedict Cumberbatch?
Ooh. Well, hello.
Hello.
Welcome back, guys. We're at you with another episode of Have You Seen This? And we're on to our third episode of the Underworld series.
Fourth movie, third episode.
That's right. Fourth movie if we're looking at how they're made. This one is Underworld Awakening, released in 2012. So pretty nice, pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely feels updated.
It does. It has a better look and a better vibe to it, I think.
Yeah. Should we general impressions, get those out of the way?
Sure. Do you want to start off with
Okay. The whole movie felt sleeker than the first two. It was a whole new crew working on it, and I think that showed in some ways for the better, in some ways for the worse.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I really liked that this movie felt sleeker, and not only that, it felt leaner as a movie.
For sure.
It felt like it shed a lot of the weight that the first two were carrying around in terms of world building and mythology. This one was much more streamlined and had an emphasis on story, so I was really appreciative of that. The rest, I think, we'll get into as we talk about it. Your general impressions, sir?
Yeah, I would agree with you on the points of it being much more streamlined, much more updated, which, you would hope to expect from a movie. It was a little bit of time between Underworld Evolution and this one, about 6 years. So it was kind of cool to see the story kind of match a little bit more of the time that it was made. So I definitely would agree with you. A little bit leaner, a little bit more straightforward. Not a ton to not as much for me and notes as the other movies.
Our note taking is about even this time.
I know. Like we're getting there.
I mean, well, for one thing, I tried to relax a little bit because it was like, come on, Luke, you don't need to write down everything. But for another thing, it just felt like things were much more coherent in this movie.
For sure. And
there was less stuff than I needed to write down. Like in the previous movies, everything I wrote down was sort of a matter of like, shoot, I need to remember this.
Right.
This movie was like, I think I'm going to remember this just fine. And there wasn't a lot of outrageous moments for me to be like, wait, what?
Well, hold on a minute.
There were still a couple. It is an Underworld movie.
This goes with the territory.
But, yeah.
All right.
Want to jump in?
Yeah, let's jump into the overview of this a little bit. So we find the Underworld. This next one is set a little bit after Evolution, right? It's kind of in the aftermath.
Oh, I told you I was going to explain. I'm going to get the whiteboard.
Get the whiteboard.
I'm going to get the whiteboard.
Let's get this cracking.
Okay. I got to keep all this. Keep the struggle.
Gotta do it.
One of these days I'm going to remember to grab the whiteboard before I sit down.
One of these days, yeah. Maybe
right, so we still have everything written on here. Victor sucks at time. Yep. There's the Corvinus line.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to try and explain the timeline, because I did the research, and I figured out exactly what the timeline is. So, all right. 2003 is when the first two Underworld movies take place. So Underworld 1 and Underworld Evolution. Because they actually take place back-to-back, even though they were released 3 years apart.
Right.
So under that caption, I'm going to write 1 and 2. So the very beginning of this movie, we catch up with Kate Beckinsale, Celine, and Michael, not Scott Speedman.
Yeah.
Definitely not Scott Speedman.
Yeah.
Just some stuntman with Scott Speedman's face CGI'd over his.
Kind of weird.
But we catch up with the two of them in 2004. And this part is a little weird because they go back and forth saying it's been 12 years since that night and it's been 11 years since that night. So it's not. I'm having a hard time keeping straight which it is.
Right.
But so that's the beginning of this movie. And then some spoiler alert, they get cryogenically frozen.
Of course. When in doubt, freeze it. Freeze it out.
And that jumps forward to the main plot of this movie, which is confirmed online to take place in 2015. So in the movie, they jump back and forth between saying she's been in cryogenic sleep for 11 years, and sometimes they say she's been in it for 12 years. But officially, according to what I can figure out from online, the beginning of the movie takes place in 2004, and then when she wakes up from cryogenic sleep in 2015. By the way, actually, we'll get to that in a second.
Cool. Sounds good.
So that is the timeline. It's a little ambiguous in the movie, but the movie came out in 2012, so they were actually sort of doing a movie that was in the future, but it was also a alternate future timeline.
Yes.
I do want to point out, we talk about this movie being sleeker and a little more focused, and some of you out there are wondering, like, well, it's a whole new cast and crew, it's a whole new different thing. Is it really an Underworld movie? And we can say, yes, it is definitely an Underworld movie. How do we know? It starts with a recap montage and voiceover.
Yes, of course.
Like all great Underworld movies must.
Right, in case you just stumbled in on this movie after watching none of the other ones.
Which, by the way, movie number 4, I don't know who's walking into this movie with no knowledge whatsoever of the past 3.
Right.
But also, this movie exists enough in its own world that, well, okay, no, actually that's not entirely fair. It's probably better if you've seen the first 3, but if you walk into this one, it is sort of a soft reboot of things, and you'd probably be okay. Like, anything that wasn't... Yeah, so without the voiceover and opening montage, even if you walked into the movie without that, everything important that's left over from the previous movies more or less gets explained. So...
Yeah, so there you go.
You could jump into this movie without a recap montage and be fine. But it's an Underworld movie.
Yeah.
So recap montage
You gotta have
for sure. And then, again, classic Underworld movie. In, like, the opening, like, prelude, they just drop a huge bomb on everything. So we've been complaining the last 2 movies that they indicate that the military seems to know that vampires and werewolves exist, but there's no follow-up on that idea at all. There's no follow-up on the idea that humans might be aware of their existence. This movie is the follow-up.
Comes out swinging. People know, and they are not happy.
They're pissed.
Yeah, they're just murking everybody in the street.
But now I feel like an idiot in those earlier videos. Then I'm like, how come we're not chasing this thread? Turns out Celine and Michael are the idiots for not chasing that thread. Because they let it slide, and then humans rose up, man.
Right, they're like, hey, might as well do a preemptive strike and get rid of these guys while we can.
And by the way, I wrote this down. I wrote humans win. Really?
Yeah, I know, right?
Like, not to sound pessimistic towards my own species, but this movie posits the theory that we as humans basically eradicate vampires and werewolves, like, with ease.
Yeah.
Well, not with ease, but there's a great purge.
Yes.
And they're extinct, and they're, like, living in the gutter, just trying to survive. And I'm like, wait, the humans win? Like, really? Like, you can kill us with just about anything. Like, based on what we've seen in these movies, in order to kill vampires and werewolves, you need to, like, mutilate them awfully. So we win? Are you sure?
I know, it's like you and your friend are having a fight, and then your little brother just comes up and whips both of you, and you're like, what just happened? What are we doing here?
So going back to our timeline, 2004. So we're in the movie. We're briefly told there's 2 great purges. So the first great purge takes place in 2004, and they just start straight up massacring vampires and werewolves, like, in the streets, by the way.
Yeah.
And the second great purge takes place sometime.
Somewhere in there.
They don't bother explaining. They just drop in there that there's 2 great purges. So the funniest part, I think, about them introducing the idea that humans are aware of the existence of vampires and lycans. Not only are they aware of it, but humans are actively trying to kill vampires and lycans. They bring up that idea, and then it has no effect on the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, am I wrong?
No, it just seems like there's not a lot.
The Wicked Witch of the East, bro! Am I wrong? Are you going to look at me in the face and tell me that I'm wrong?
No, but, like, it just seems like everybody got out what they needed to in their system. It's all good. We're all just living as we need to.
Like, if anything, it seems like more of an excuse for them to bring vampires and werewolves fighting out in, like, the full eye of the public and have nobody bat an eye.
Yeah.
So if anything, it almost seems like an attempt to cover up like what we were complaining about in the first one, where they're like they fight in crowded places and none of the humans question it. If anything, it was brought up like if anything, this entire subplot of humans know and are trying to kill everybody. It's almost like it was trying to plug their own plot hole of like, oh, now they can have fights in the middle of the street, and the humans like are going to be like, oh, vampires and werewolves, obviously.
Makes sense.
So yeah, it has really no effect on the plot because
Not really.
once again, the plot ultimately is vampires versus werewolves.
Yeah, at its roots, that's what it's
Even
about.
though the first two movies were about like breaking down the prejudices between vampires and werewolves.
Forget that.
Forget all of that. We're going right back to werewolves suck, vampires rule.
Werewolf vampire crime on crime.
Just gang fights in the streets. But I think we're supposed to root for the vampires.
I know, right? It's always like, yeah, the Lycans, they always are like the bad guys.
Except in the first two movies, they're like making it so clear that there is like the vampires are just as responsible as the werewolves.
Yeah.
And they need to break down prejudices. And then this movie's like, no, forget that. Werewolves are the bad guys.
They're bad. Everything you thought about a werewolf was correct.
Everything you assumed. It was very weird.
Yeah, it kind of went back on itself.
Right. Sorry.
You good?
We can move forward in the story. I just now that we've established why the like baseline of this story is insane.
Right, I know. It's just kind of like, all right.
So again, we like this movie.
It is. It's
But it's still an Underworld movie, so there's got to be just an undercurrent of insanity. It has to be based upon the rock of insanity.
It's got to have a little whack in it.
In this instance, humans have like hardcore tried to straight up genocide.
They're just like, hey, we know them. We're just going to get rid of them. Problem solved.
But again, doesn't really have an effect on the plot. There's still vampires around. There's
Yep.
still werewolves around, and they still fight each other.
They're still going after it.
Still going after it. All right, let's get into the actual story of the movie now. We have the setup. We have the premise.
This is the setup.
Now it's all about the actual story of the movie.
Yes, so getting into that, we find ourselves in a Purge era sort of mentality, and then you have Celine trying to get away with Michael, get away from all the heat.
I don't know who that guy is, but it's not Michael.
Yeah, it's not Michael.
It's the Sony PS4 version of Michael.
Exactly. Those are my exact thoughts. It's like if Underworld Awakening, the video game, was made, that's what Michael would look like in the video game.
During the opening credits of the movie, by the way, like we're watching, and instead of like the first two we watched, there was just a Screen Gems like company logo or whatever. This one had 3 or 4.
I know.
And 2 of them were like really obscure ones that we had never heard of. See, these little tiny studios that mean nothing to us. And Lanson just goes, what is this, the opening to a video game?
It really does feel like that, where you're like, it's almost like, it's like a level below a movie, and you're kind of like, well, that's kind of a graphic design sort of logo. I'm not quite sure what that's about. But yeah, it kind of looked like they were introducing Underworld Awakening, the video game.
Yeah. And all the shots of, like, The Great Purge in 2004 are very, like, PS4 computer graphic, like, definitely made in a computer.
Yeah.
Just obscure shots of a skyline on fire, obviously made in a computer. That's basically, like, all we see of The Great Purge.
That's all you need to know.
Which would have been a much more interesting movie, by the way.
For sure.
Well, maybe not. That's actually unfair. I shouldn't say that The Great Purge would be a better movie than this, but that's a really interesting premise that we see, like, 5 minutes of?
I know, and then it's like, okay, back to werewolves and vampires fighting. Enough of that.
But I guess if The Great Purge all looked like PS4 graphics, we would want to skip it anyway.
Right. Yep.
So I interrupted your flow.
No, you're good. I mean, this is what this is all about. A little bit of flow, a little bit of commentary. So anyway, Michael and Celine, they're trying to dodge the heat, trying to get out of it. The government's after him. They got the military after him. Stuff gets crazy. Celine tries to save Michael. They get separated when a bomb goes off. They
a very specific image of that repeats several times in the movie. Them, like, embracing, and then a bomb going off between them.
Yeah. Just, they wanted to get their money's worth in there, you know.
We spent so much money on that expensive-looking computer graphic gamma ray explosion.
Jerry had to like forego his weekend to make this happen. So we're
Some
gonna put
intern
it
sat at a computer for 3 weeks straight, making that explosion look real nice.
Right. So we got to give it some respect. Got to give it a shout out.
Gotta give it respect.
Right. So anyway, in the midst of that blast, Celine ends up being knocked unconscious. It's kind of a little bit of haziness, and then Celine wakes up and she's kind of surrounded in a very different sort of setting than when she found herself in. It's a facility. She's an icicle hanging upside down.
She's in a cryogenic tube.
Right.
And she's having visions through somebody else's eyes, seeing them like press buttons on her chamber to let her out.
Right.
Also, I did write this down. I was like, how do you prove it's an Underworld movie? Start with a recap montage and voiceover, and then find a way to needlessly, like, find a scene where Kate Beckinsale could just be needlessly naked.
Yes.
And so she's naked in the cryogenic freezer for really no reason, because she busts out of it, and then apparently her outfit is just lying right there.
They just kept it tucked away.
Yeah, like, and by the way, not one that looks like her outfit. It is her outfit, just like hanging up in a closet in the corner of the room. So she's needlessly naked as she busts out of the cryotube just to put on her suit again immediately after.
Man, that's a funny storyline. Just some scientists like undressing her and just being like, "All right, just gonna keep these here in case you ever wake up."
Was that Len Wiseman?
I'm gonna put my number in your suit. If you ever want to contact me, that's fine.
I have a factoid about this.
Fantastic. Let's hear
So on, I gotta find it. Yes, in the original script, written in early 2011, Celine's Death Dealer outfit is actually not in the same room where she wakes up. So she wears it in the opening scene, but then she unfreezes and she's in a medical gown, and she was supposed to wear that for most of the story until she arrives at David's coven, where he has an old Death Dealer outfit that's not hers but is similar to hers, and that would be her new costume. So their intention was to actually give her an updated costume that wasn't stuck in the early 2000s, but apparently somewhere along the way somebody intervened and said, no. We need the classic Celine look. And she got stuck in the same weird latex unitard she's been wearing for the rest of the series. So I gotta admit, kind of bummed. Sorry, Katie. I would have really liked to see you in like an updated look. I would have been genuinely excited about that, but not this time.
It was very. Listen, this is what the people want. Just keep to the skeevy costume.
Listen, we want the latex. We want it so bad.
Yeah, which is actually a comment that Luke and I brought up. We were like, yeah, I mean, it is in 2012 when this was made and released, but it's still got that early 2005.
Yeah, there's still just enough of like early 2000s. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's not a good thing.
No, yeah.
It's still a little stuck in the early 2000s. And like I said, when the rest of the movie is such a clean reboot, it was a little disappointing to still have some part of it that was stuck in the original era of the film.
Right.
They should have just kind of clean slate with it. Because I feel like the storyline really allowed them to move forward with a clean slate. And then they just kind of, I don't know. They were probably trying to pay homage to the original movies, but I would have preferred that we just kind of started new and started with a new slate in terms of tone.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. So she ends up breaking out of her upside down icicle. Of course.
Yeah, she's upside down.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
Obviously.
Yeah.
She's a vampire. She sleeps upside down.
Even when she's in cryo freeze.
Even when you freeze her, gotta turn her upside down. That's just what they prefer.
It's the only way she's gonna sleep that well. So she breaks out. Obviously, they're your classic sort of security guards are like, "Hey, man, you gotta get back in there. We're gonna shut her down and all this." And so she ends up fighting quite a few guards. Gets her way through the building. She's trying to
the beginning. So one thing that I kind of didn't think about until you made the comment. I forgot that she drank Corvinus's blood at the end of Evolution, and she's now like a more evolved vampire. So she's more powerful than she was before, right? And you made the comment, like, kind of watching her beat up. So the whole beginning of the movie, starting with her beating up military guys in the Purge, moving into her beating up all these guys in the laboratory, like, you made the comment that they really did a good job of updating her and making her feel more powerful than she did before, and showing that she's settled into the Corvinus evolved powers. And after you pointed it out, I was like, you're right. She definitely feels different and more powerful in this movie. So they did really good on that. I have to say, with the military guys, I didn't have this as much, but when she was, like, beating up the random, like, you know, mini-mall security guards in the laboratory, it was weird to see such aggressive violence being done against humans.
Yeah.
Like, something about when it's vampires and she's, like, crushing their heads and, like, stabbing them with their own bones, you're like, well, they're vampires.
I can
like,
get on board with that.
Yeah, like, from what we'd seen in the first two movies, in order to kill a vampire, you had to, like, straight up mutilate them.
Yeah.
So, like, you're like, it takes a lot to kill a vampire, so the extreme violence, you kind of let it slide. But when it's just, like, a regular Joe getting, like, stabbed multiple times in the neck with a knife, it's really actually, like, it feels weird. It feels real wrong. So that was something that happened in the movie that I didn't care for. Luckily, that's just, like, the opening scene, and then humans aren't really a part of the rest of the movie.
Yeah, which is, you know.
But there is like the weird scene in the lab where it's just like a bunch of, like, office workers, like, just doing their job. It's not like trained military people trying to kill her. These are just, like, genuinely, like, mall cop level security guards getting brutally murdered by her, and that felt weird. And then of course, I gotta double check his name. I said his name when we were watching the movie, but I gotta just make sure that it is actually his name. Okay. I think it's Wes Bentley, the guy from the Hunger Games.
Wes Bentley, yep.
Why was he there?
Right. It really, you know, he's there for a minute.
Real waste of that guy, frankly.
He's great. You know, very talented.
I like him, yeah. He's a very talented actor. And he's really done dirty in this movie.
He really is.
So, yeah, he kind of shows up. Yeah, Wes Bentley is his name. So, yeah, the guy from the Hunger Games.
Yes.
I mean, among other things, American Beauty was probably, like, the big thing everybody would know him from.
The first Ghost Rider.
Obviously. That's fair. We can ignore American Beauty because Kevin Spacey movies no longer exist. But anyway, so yeah, Wes Bentley shows up, and I'm like, awesome! I'm excited to see what they do with him. He kind of plays like a random underling scientist guy, who again is just like a guy working an office job. He's not particularly evil. He's not a good guy by any means. But yeah, like, he has a total of like a minute of screen time before Celine brutally murders him.
Yep.
Like, throws him out of a window, and we watch him fall onto a car. And it's like, whoa, what, why was he in this movie?
What are we doing here, people?
Why did you cast him when you could cast any, like, random nobody?
Right.
Like, why are you wasting money on Wes Bentley if you're just gonna do him dirty like that with less than a minute of screen time? There was no reason for him to be in this movie. And again, it just fed into the weird, like, violence against humans in the Underworld series, like, feels wrong.
Feels weird.
Feels real weird.
Yeah.
But that's the last human death of the movie, I think.
Thankfully.
It seems, at least. That's the last human death of the movie. Right. Where were we? Oh, we skipped... I don't want to skip that because it's in your notes. The truck driver guy.
Oh, yes. So, Celine, while she's breaking out of the facility, she ends up getting hit by a truck driver, actually. And what's kind of cool, the guy pulls out his gun and is shooting at her. Shoots her in the head. Yeah, I know.
Does nothing.
Yep, does nothing. Got that Corvinus blood. So anyway, Celine ends up getting this guy and biting him and actually drinking his blood, which is pretty cool because this is the first time we've seen in the Underworld movies of Celine drinking blood.
Yes. At least I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's ever happened. I mean, other than Corvinus, I guess.
That's true.
But that's sort of its... But this is the first time we've seen her, like... attack a person and drink their blood.
Right.
And it was a really interesting moment. The first time we've seen her drink human blood, for sure.
For sure, yeah. She ends up using that, regenerates, has that blood pop right out of her skull, which is pretty cool.
Very cool.
No.
It was funny, too, because, like, in the Underworld franchise, we forget that people drink blood for sustenance.
Yeah.
Because it's almost always about, like, seeing memories.
Yeah.
So when she bit into the truck driver dude's neck, you went, what, how are his memories valuable? Like, what does he matter?
I wonder what we're going to find out about this guy.
Lanson was literally like, wait, why do we need to see this guy's memories?
Well, it made sense, you know. She used it to be able to get some sustenance and regenerate, so.
It was just funny because we forget in the Underworld movies that that's a thing.
Yeah.
Because it's almost always about getting information.
Getting those memories. Getting those juicy, juicy memories.
It's been juicy.
Oh, yeah.
Burpstown.
Oh,
Right. We're already halfway through my notes.
fantastic.
We're doing so good.
Right on.
Yeah. So, let's see. She escapes. She kills Wes Bentley very needlessly.
Yeah.
She's still having visions where she seems to be seeing things through another person's eyes.
Right.
And she thinks it's Michael.
Yeah. This is really her intention. She's trying to get to Michael and be reunited with him.
Yeah. While all this is going on, we see that whoever this person is, they're leaving kind of a pretty big trail of carnage in their wake. I think that's part of why she thinks it's Michael.
Right.
And it draws the attention of two new characters. So during Underworld Evolution, we said there's no new friends in the Underworld franchise. We were wrong.
Right.
There were
new friends.
There were several new friends in this movie.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of this movie.
For keeping them around.
For having new friends. Yeah.
Right.
So we have two new friends that come about during this sequence. We have David, played by the unbelievably handsome Theo James.
Oh, yeah. Dreamboat.
Known for Divergent.
Yes.
That's the franchise he was in, right?
Divergent. Yep.
So we have one actor from The Hunger Games, one actor from Divergent. We'll get somebody from The Maze Runner, and we'll just round it all up.
There you go.
So David, played by Theo James, starts trailing her. He's sort of mysterious at first, although he gets explained pretty quickly once he and Celine actually meet.
Right.
But then the other character is Detective Sebastian, played by Michael Ealy.
Great actor.
I gotta double check that that's his name.
Yeah.
And this is a good time to mention that once again, great casting in this movie.
For sure. Solid.
So we don't like that, and really awesome because there isn't even a like Craven situation in this movie. Every actor knocks it out of the park. And Michael Ealy, I mostly know him for work in like comedies, actually. So seeing him in this playing a really tired-looking, depressed detective was really interesting. So yeah, Michael Ealy plays a human detective named Detective Sebastian, who starts investigating. I say investigating because he doesn't really do a lot of investigating. He's not in a lot of like the first two acts of the movie.
Yeah.
But he comes in strong in the third act. But yeah, he's sort of investigating the trail of bodies that this mysterious person is leaving behind. So Celine is trying to track down this person, David is trying to track down this person, and Detective Sebastian is trying to track down this mysterious person leaving like a trail of bodies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I got it.
No, you got it perfectly.
So we made new friends. We make new friends in this one. It's nice.
Which is fun. Very handsome friends, I might add, as well.
Yeah.
Very talented.
Theo James especially, like, it's unfair that guy exists.
I know, right? You're watching that, you're like, well, okay.
I know.
This is what we got in the world.
There's the scene where he, like, steps out in the light in, like, defiance of it. Spoiler alert. He, like, steps out in the light in, like, defiance of his father, wearing that really, like, really tight shirt and, like, all those weapons on. And it's like, oh, come on.
Look at that guy.
Ah, come on. Guy's too good looking.
Good on him.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, the company she's running away from is Antigen.
Antigen.
I wrote that down in my margins. I was like, that'll be important. I don't know that it's that important, but now you know the name, Antigen.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of names that I caught. David's name we actually didn't catch until like the very end of the movie, which was interesting.
Yeah. I know. The whole time we're like, what is his name? David. Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the one.
So there were a couple names along the way. Right. Oh yeah, and like seeing things through the eyes. Wes Bentley says something about it, right? He says they're psychically linked.
Yeah, their brain waves are synchronized.
Yeah,
or
their
something like that.
their brain waves synchronize when they're near each other,
That's right.
which I don't really have a comment for other than no. I mean, but that's sort of the Underworld thing, right? Is they like explaining supernatural things with science, but ultimately it doesn't quite add up. Like the idea that being a vampire is actually just being infected with a virus
Yeah.
doesn't really hold up. Immortality is a virus, that doesn't really hold up. So like it's forgivable because they try to explain supernatural things with science and kind of merge the two together to make science fiction fantasy. And you gotta suspend your disbelief just a little bit and just kind of be okay with it. But yeah, like brainwaves syncing up, I don't really think that you would be able to see through that person's eyes. And the rules of that are weird too because periodically Celine sees through this other person's eyes and then somehow like still with her own eyes has perfect aim in
Yeah.
shooting down lichens.
Yes.
Right. So where are we in the film?
Yeah, so we are. Celine is catching up with this mystery person, as well as she also senses that, well, along with Theo James being there, there are a couple lichens, kind of like sewer ratty lichens that are a lot less impressive than the other lichens in the film. So anyway, she ends up scaring away the lichens, and then she ends up finding this mystery person.
Oh, and she does meet David.
Yes.
Because she goes down into the sewers trying to find this person where the lichens are. And she also, like, runs into David. And they have kind of a hilarious conversation where, like I said, he's mysterious at first, but she, like, pulls a gun and she's like, why shouldn't I kill you? And he flashes his vampire eyes and goes, because I'm like you. And then she's like, what's going on with these lichens? And he's like, they're tracking something. So what is it you're not telling me? Like, he says it in, like, a weird, like, action movie way, Like, two character, like, it's like the moment in Predator, right? Yep. Like, you set us up! Like,
we're in the meat grinder.
We're in the meat grinder. Like, the way he says it is like they've been hanging out for a while now, and she's kept something hidden that's now, like, got them in danger. It's like a standard action movie line.
Yeah.
Except it makes no sense in this context because they met 3 seconds ago. She said like what, a sentence to him?
Yep.
So when would she have time to bring up the fact that she's like tracking somebody?
I too am following this person that you are also following.
Yeah, so he's like, there's something you're not telling me, and it's like, yeah, because she met you 3 seconds ago, dude.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff she hasn't told you. She hasn't found the time yet.
Right. You don't know each other well enough quite yet.
And by the way, like, not a knock on Theo James, just a knock on the script.
Yeah.
Because Theo James friggin' sells it in this movie.
He does.
And again, but we always spend every one of these complimenting the actors and saying, like, these guys are killing it, even though they're being handed not great material.
Here you go. Make something happen.
They make something happen.
Yeah.
So, like, whenever we talk about these movies, keep in mind, the only actor we dislike is the guy who played Craven. Never forget the
Crave.
Never forget the Crave.
Not craving that guy.
Oh man, yeah. So something you're not telling me. I have 2 more notes for this whole movie.
All right, right on.
Right. So yes, she chases the lichens away.
Yes.
And rounds a corner to see who this mystery person finally is. She's expecting Michael. Spoiler alert: it is not.
It is a girl. It is a 13-year-old girl, somewhere around there.
Okay, so according to this timeline, this girl must be 11 years old.
11.
Which, in the context of the movie, by the way,
doesn't quite
add up.
Yeah.
So this girl at some point is asked her name. She says, "My name is Subject to." It's the only name I've ever had.
Yeah.
But in the credits, she is actually referred to as Eve. So we will call her Eve
Cool.
because that feels nicer than calling her Subject
A
to.
lot better. Yeah.
So Eve is born sometime in 2004. After Celine has gone into cryosleep. That's an important detail. You want to tell them why it's an important detail?
Yes, because Eve is Celine's daughter that she had with Michael.
Making Eve the last direct descendant of Alexander Corvinus and the first vampire werewolf hybrid born in a natural birth. Also, I assume the first vampire born in a natural birth.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Actually, maybe the first werewolf too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that Lucian counts fully.
Not really. It's not like his parents were werewolves.
Yeah. So she's the first born immortal.
Right.
So she's like a big deal.
Super special.
She was raised in this lab, Antigen, and she knew that Celine was her mom. No. Yes.
I think she did. She didn't. I don't think she had met her.
She has a weird. She has a weird monologue of like, "I always sensed that you were there."
Yeah.
So yeah, Eve is 11, which doesn't add up because the actress who plays her is clearly not 11.
Right.
And spoiler alert, there's a weird like. There are several lines of dialogue that refer specifically to Eve being of age.
Yeah.
Meaning she's like matured fully into being a woman or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is what the scientists need for their experiments, which are vague and never really explained. And I'm not an expert on female puberty, but I have trouble believing that Eve is done at 11.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't sound quite right.
I don't know. Maybe her whole aging process is accelerated a little because she is like a different. Wasn't that like a thing in Twilight? Didn't Edward and Bella have a kid?
Yeah.
And it aged. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl. And it aged like
Yeah,
quicker than a normal baby would.
Yeah, she aged like she was like fully grown at like age 10 or something like that. Or something.
I don't.
A while since I've seen that one.
I remember somebody told me the weird detail of the daughter and Jacob get together, and I'm like,
which is weird.
Yeah, come to Uncle Jakey.
No, thank you. Just move on, dude. Just
I don't care.
Pick a different family.
I don't care that you're Taylor Lautner.
That's just.
I like Taylor Lautner, but no thanks.
Not that much.
No thanks.
Yeah.
All right. So they find Eve. They are attacked by the Lycans. There's a pretty cool sequence where they're fighting them off in a car.
Mm-hmm.
We see David's pretty capable handling himself against them. We see Eve transform into her hybrid form, which is how it's confirmed that she's a hybrid.
Yeah.
And she kills one pretty easily in a moment of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Celine, of course, is just killing them with ease.
Right.
But Eve is hurt during the attack and doesn't seem to be healing. So David says, we'll go back to my coven and we have a doctor there that can heal her. And I immediately said, like, what does a vampire doctor do other than, like, you know, drink some blood and call me in the morning? Like, what?
Right, pretty much.
I don't know what a vampire doctor is supposed to do other than that. But they go to the coven.
Yep.
And that is where I wrote my second to last note, which is, where is this?
Right.
Because once again, perfectly ambiguous. All the vampire characters speak in English accents, but they do periodically speak in, was it Russian?
Yeah, I think that was the language.
They seem to periodically speak in Russian. Kate Beckin, so Celine knew Russian, but that doesn't seem to be her place of origin.
Yeah.
And then all the other characters we meet in the movie are American.
Yep.
So, and also Detective Sebastian drives an American-made car, but with a Swedish license plate. Or I think it's Swedish. It's at least United Kingdom.
Sure.
So, again, these movies just don't, like, there's no context of where these movies are taking place.
Yeah.
And this one's even worse than the last one, because in the last one, we were at least able to rule out America.
Yeah.
Like, it was clearly somewhere in Europe. This one is, like, not as clear. It could be America. It could not be. It's so ambiguous. So, yeah, again, no idea where these movies are supposed to be taking place.
Right, it's a mystery.
But then again, it was 3 years in the future from 2012. Maybe they imagined it was like a whole new country.
Right.
Someone that had never existed before.
Pangea reunited.
Because we're now in an alternate timeline of history.
True.
Where in 2004 we discovered werewolves and vampires exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a whole other alternate timeline of history. So who knows? It could be a whole new country.
Right.
Who knows?
Only the directors, I would assume.
Only the directors. Oh, I missed one important note. Which this is just me bragging about being a smart boy. Detective Sebastian goes to Antigen to question their head researcher, their head scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they never really explain what this guy's job is.
Right.
He just is in charge.
He does stuff.
Dr. Jacob Lane is his name. So
okay.
Detective Sebastian goes to interview Lane, and Lane basically denies that they had a subject that they were studying escape. He denies that anyone escaped. And he also says, I don't want this disease spreading any more than you do. I lost my son to this disease.
Yeah.
And me being a smart boy, I was like, that's coming back later.
And it did.
And it sure did. Sure was important later. Sorry, just wanted to make sure we hit that note so it's not confusing later.
Right.
Where were we in this story?
Right, so we are at the coven. David has brought Eve to the coven.
And we quickly learned that all covens are the same, which is the main characters walk through the door walking with purpose, and everybody else is lounging around, and they go, wait, what?
What are you guys doing?
Who are these people?
Oh, you disturbed my nap.
So a whole new coven, not Celine's from the original.
Yep.
But it does confirm our theory that Death Dealer isn't a coven. It is a specific kind of vampire that is trained to kill Lycans.
Right.
David confirms this in dialogue with Celine at the coven.
Right.
So we were correct about that. Yeah, they show up at the coven. The coven is exactly the same, except they're not in a nice mansion. They're no longer rich. They now live in a sewer.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's the same. They're just like lavishing about. They're like, Kate Beckinsale.
Well, hello.
What are you doing here? What is going on? David, fill us in, will you?
Where did these guys got conquered so easily? They're just laying around, just like, whatever, man. I don't care.
The only noteworthy vampire is frickin' Charles Dance. Shows up. He's David's dad, and his name is
Father.
They didn't share a lot of names. Thomas. They never said that.
No.
They never said it, but his name is Thomas, and he is the head of that coven.
Yes.
So he's the only other important vampire character. Nobody else in the room even has a name.
Not really. Doesn't really matter too much.
Doesn't matter at all.
Yep. Yeah. So.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Sounds good. We'll see what we can do here. So Eve, just like you were saying with the vampire doctor, like what do they actually do? She gave her some blood, just fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Although there was like a moment where they're like, "When's the last time you drank blood?" And she's like, "Drank blood."
What?
And they're like, "She's got 11 years without drinking blood. Outrageous. Give her some. Give her some immediately."
Let the kid have some. Come on, she's of age.
She's of age.
Whatever that is.
Whatever that is in this vague script.
much.
Goodness gracious.
Yes.
So yeah, Eve heals.
They find out she is a hybrid by looking at her eyes and looking at some of the physical characteristics that she has.
Yes.
David's father is very hesitant to have her there because um, he knows that the humans that they escaped from will come to the Covenant and try to reclaim her. Um, so
Yeah, so even Celine, we didn't, yeah, so like even Celine definitely walk into like a weird argument between David and Thomas
right,
in that Thomas is very defeated and kind of cowardly at this point. He's just very concerned with trying to survive
yeah,
and trying to keep his vampire bloodline going. David, on the other hand, wants to establish a place for vampires in the world. He wants to fight back. He's young and scrappy. He's got fight in him.
yeah,
And there is like a very serious argument going on between the two of them over this. And bringing home Celine and Eve is sort of just like another way he's defying his father by like trying to stand up and fight instead of just like hunkering underground. Uh, yeah, so like David and Celine have a scene where they're alone talking, and that's where he reveals that Death Dealers were like a hardcore specific brand of like lichen hunting vampires, because he says that Celine is the only one left, and he used to idolize them and wanted to be one himself before the Great Purge happened. And then he basically says that vampires need to learn how to fight again and take their place back in the world. And he's been training himself trying to learn how to fight, but he wants her to teach him. Oh yeah, and he has the moment where he goes, "When you leave, take me with you." And Lanson's like, you ain't exactly Scott Speedman, buddy."
There's only one Scott Speedman.
Only one Scott Speedman.
That's right.
And honestly, his absence looms large over this movie.
It really does.
CGI Scott Speedman ain't doing it, guys.
Very wanted.
I'm out of notes.
Sounds good. All good.
We're
man.
freestyling the rest of this movie.
We're just gonna come at you with a freestyle, make it work. Yeah, so they, David and his father are having some tension of this ideology of what to do with the future of the covens and with vampires in general. There's a bit of a dynamic between.
We're making this sound so much more interesting than it was in the actual movie, by the way.
Right.
In the movie, it was a little bit like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, all of the like parent-child drama in the movie was kind of.
Yeah.
Sorry, cut off your flow again.
No, you good. We'll keep this flow going. So anyway, there's a couple dynamics there, Eve and Celine. But anyway,
yeah, Eve and Celine are like. Celine wakes up and is like, "I have a daughter now." So they have a brief moment where they connect a little bit to make up for 11 years of neglect.
Right, which
not her fault. Not her fault.
Right,
but
for
yeah.
sure. It would be, that'd be pretty crazy.
Have to try and develop the relationship between a mother and daughter.
Yeah, I know. You've been asleep for 11 years and you have a daughter. The world's different. Your species is almost dead, and there you go. Yeah. So they end up getting alarmed to some intruders, which Eve, being like many main characters in these movies, like is nobody can sneak up on them. They always sense when somebody's around that shouldn't be around, and so they start making preparations. They're getting ready for a bunch of humans to attack them, and guess who knocks down the door? Bunch of lichens.
Yeah, it's like a big twist, and this twist actually surprised me.
Yeah,
I was not expecting lichens to come to the door. They set it up like it's going to be a bunch of human soldiers. And you're like, all right, now we're gonna see like how effective humans really are. Like, finally, we'll see the vampires kick trash. No, lichens bust through the door, and yeah, they just massacre like everybody.
Yeah, like they brought the A-team. Something to note: the ones that just kind of earlier on in the movie that you see kind of below in the sewer are kind of ratty, but these ones, like, this is the A-team. This is the varsity team that came to play.
The ones in the sewer, David says that they've basically been living like rats, because if they go above ground, they'll be killed. So they've been fighting over scraps in the sewer, and they're very scrawny. They look very unhealthy.
Yeah.
They definitely don't look like these guys. These guys are fed prime beef, doing
Working
all right for
out.
themselves. They hit the gym.
Yep.
They're in a much healthier condition than the ones we saw earlier,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and the
it's
practical
brutal.
effects look really good for those werewolves, I would add.
Yeah, should we talk a little bit about like the effects in this movie?
Sure.
Because I'll be honest, they were hit and miss.
Yeah.
Some of the effects really worked. Some of the effects really did not.
Yeah.
I mean, we already talked about PS4 Scott Speedman, which did not work at all. But also, like, they brought back the practical effect lichens.
Yeah.
So, like, the lichens at the beginning in the sewer were all CGI. They left a little something to be desired.
Yeah.
But then they brought back the full, like, prosthetic lichens, and this design was so much better than Evolution.
Oh,
It
for
felt...
sure.
So, yeah, the prosthetics... I think, again, sort of the trouble we're running into in these movies is something that happened a lot with movies like this, where the first movie had to rely on practical effects just due to budget, like as much as they could. But as the movies got more money, they started using more CGI. And so now, we're at a point, 2012, where all movies are being made with as much CGI as possible, really.
Yeah.
People don't really care about the practical effects anymore. So the CGI stuff all kind of falls apart in this movie, with some exceptions.
Yeah.
With some exceptions. But all of the practical stuff ends up looking really good. And so there's just a gap there that's really, really quite jarring, to go from effects that look terrible, like when Eve in the car chase thing with the rabid wolves from underground, she like rips one's head in half, and it's just awful. It looks so bad. It is such a terrible effect. But then you have this scene where practical effect guys in suits, lichens, run in, and we get some practical effect gore as they kill the vampires, and it looks great.
It does.
So having that like gap between the two was a little weird.
Not a good union between the two.
Not a good union, because one was just a much higher class than the other.
For sure.
Yeah,
so while the lichens are showing up and clearing house, they're trying to get out of there, trying to escape.
And it's very quickly shown that David is like the only competent fighter in the coven.
Yeah.
We do see redemption for the Silver Whip, which we
Right?
criticized hardcore
In the first one.
in the episode about the first one,
Yeah.
because it did nothing. We were like, that's not going to do anything. David proved us wrong.
Yeah.
He killed a lichen with the Silver Whip, and it was actually really dope.
Yeah.
It was clearly CGI, but we were able to forgive it.
Right. There was some cool stuff done with it, and what was cool about it is that David used it in a way where he was just using it as another tool in his arsenal instead of that being like his go-to, which I think helps a lot with kind of redeeming that weapon specifically.
Yeah, like we criticized that it was that guy's, in the first movie, that seemed to be the guy's like main weapon.
Yeah.
And I think part of redeeming it was seeing it in action and seeing it actually kill a lichen, and also to, like you said, the fighter is so much cooler if he doesn't have to rely on it.
Right.
If he can use it and use it well, but then immediately move on to another weapon as soon as that one stops being effective.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, good on David. He really was really good in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. So another thing to note, while all the lichens are coming in, you find that there's an alpha amongst them. This werewolf that's like twice the size of these lichens.
More than twice.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's gonna be like 20 feet tall.
Yes, no, that would make sense.
Like, at least,
if
right?
you're comparing to Kate Beckinsale when they're fighting.
Yeah, the dude, just this giant uber lichen.
Juiced up.
And this guy, admittedly, is one case of CGI in the movie that doesn't look terrible.
Yeah.
Like, it's passable.
Yeah.
It's not standout, but it's passable.
It's true.
Yeah, this guy shows up, knocks out Kate Beckinsale, and yeah, when Celine comes to, her daughter, well, when she comes to, basically everyone is dead, and David has been mortally wounded. He's lying on the ground. He's dying.
Yep.
And Thomas basically tells Celine, I wasn't going to let everybody in my coven die over your child, so I gave your child to the big scary lichen, and he left.
Yep.
So there's a few vampires still alive, just a bunch of cowardly guys. And yeah, and Eve is gone.
Yeah, she's captured.
I got a burp, so.
Do what you gotta do. So anyway, just kind of moving along in the story. It's kind of, they're kind of wondering why a bunch of lichens showed up to retrieve Eve, and they're trying to figure out why this lichen that's a lot bigger is able to regenerate, as well as is impervious
Immune to silver, yeah.
Immune to silver, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Oh, I wasn't jumping
No,
in.
no,
Sorry.
you good, you good. So just moving on, they end up kind of doing a little poking. Celine reconnects with Detective Sebastian to kind of...
Oh, we're skipping... So she chases after Eve for a second.
Oh, yes.
And then she's clearly gone, so she comes back into the coven.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes back in to see that David has died.
Oh, right.
Thomas, like, chews her out. And then she chews out Thomas for being a coward. And then she friggin' cuts David's chest open,
Yep.
slices her hand so that her special Corvinus blood is flowing out of that cut real nice and juicy.
Mm-hmm.
She plunges her hand into his chest and restarts his heart manually by, like, pumping it and getting the Corvinus blood flowing into it. And, yeah, David comes back to life, and he is now presumably evolved as well. Clearly not to the degree of Celine.
Yeah.
Because he's getting it filtered through Celine.
Right.
But he's got some of that Corvinus blood in him now.
Yeah, got the upgrade.
Got an upgrade. And, actually, yeah. Because, well, we'll get to that in a second. But he proves that he's upgraded towards the end. I didn't even think about this until just now.
Oh, yeah. Yep, okay.
Yeah, because that's in...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll talk about it in a second. Sorry.
Yes. So kind of jumping back, she reconnects with Detective Sebastian, is kind of looking into it, and long story short, it's revealed that Antigen is run by lichens.
Yes. So, Dr. Lane, when he said earlier that his son was affected by the virus, that wasn't actually a lie. His son became a lichen.
Mm-hmm.
But what he didn't reveal is that his son turned him into a lichen as well, and they became obsessed with basically wiping out humans, perfecting lichens, making lichens impervious and immortal.
Yeah.
So they want to wipe out humans and vampires, and they want lichens to be the dominant species. So they've been in secret strengthening lichens and using... This is, again, where it gets vague. They've been doing experiments on Eve, and somehow those experiments have led to these weird, like, steroid lichen shots.
I know, right?
And, yeah, so... Oh, Dr. Lane does say earlier in the movie that his son is dead. That is a lie. Yep. His son, Quint, is very much alive. Played by... Funny enough, I knew the son's name. He did say that at some point in the movie. It's played by Chris Holden Reed.
Nice.
So, Quint is the big...
He's the uber lichen.
The uber lichen. Yeah. And he became that way because they've been testing the lichen steroid on him.
Yep.
Oh, you know what? We skipped over one thing. How does Celine even know about Detective Sebastian?
The end of meeting, right?
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
He's just investigating the trail of bodies left by Eve. They never come in contact with each other at all, and then all of a sudden, she like drops in on him in a parking lot and goes, "I need your help."
That's true. Yeah. So
how do they know each other? There's no connection there other than, I guess she picks him out of a lineup. She's like, this detective will work. I don't know. This freaking guy. I don't know.
Lucky guess.
Yeah, like, there's no context for why she should know who he is.
Yeah.
Like, we know him in the movie because they introduced him and he's important. But yeah, there's no, like, I don't know how they know each other. There must be, like, a deleted scene or something. But she somehow knows to go to him.
Yeah. Well, fortunate for her and fortunate
Must
for
be part of that vague sixth sense of nobody can sneak up on you. You also know exactly who to trust.
You find the right person when you need it.
So yeah, that's one of her vague, evolved vampire powers. Is she knows exactly which human detective to trust.
Right.
So yeah, she drops in on a parking lot in him in broad daylight, which surprises him because vampires don't go out in daylight. And they figure out together that Antigen is run by lichens. And they come up with a plan for Celine to go and rescue Eve.
Yes.
And ultimately, Detective Sebastian decides to go with her, even though she's like, yeah, don't do that. He goes, no, I'm going to do it anyway.
I'm gonna help.
I'm going to help. Oh, yeah, and then we get the background on him, like, as they're driving to Antigen to do, like, their assault. They're just driving in his safe little American car with a Swedish license tag.
Yep.
And he reveals his tragic backstory.
Yes. Apparently his wife was a nurse and was bitten by a vampire, thus becoming a vampire. And during, was it the first? One of the purges.
One of the purges, they don't specify which one.
Right. Apparently the military was coming door to door to check people, to see if they're a vampire or lichen. She tells him that she loves him, and she opens up the door, releasing the sunlight and her burning up right before his eyes.
So Michael Ealy and Michael Sheen, both of their character backstories involve watching their wife erupt into flames in sunlight.
Yep. So.
Yeah. So, again, Michael Ealy giving a great performance and giving a reason for Detective Sebastian to be so depressed and tired looking all the time.
I know, and having a soft spot for vampires.
Yeah, which also explains why, like, he doesn't seem to be as anti-vampires and lichens as other humans.
Yeah.
Which is established early on because his other partner is very quick to be like, oh, it's a lichen dropping these bodies. Like, we got to put together, like, a lichen task force. And Detective Sebastian's like, no, we're not doing that. And he, like, bullcraps some excuse of, like, we haven't seen a lichen above ground in X amount of years, and I have more experience than you, so trust me when I say this is a human trying to make it look like a lichen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, early on we see he kind of has a soft spot for the immortals because he tries to take the humans off the scent. And, like, he was the one suspicious in the first place that lichens were strengthening in numbers secretly and under the radar. Although his theory was really funny. His theory was it went all the way to the top. It was a government conspiracy. The president was probably involved. But it turns out Antigen was just the company in charge of running the tests.
Yeah.
So instead of all the way to the top, it's literally just the bottom, just fake tests. So yeah, it's really funny because he gets this conspiracy theory moment of like, this goes all the way to the top, and Celine's like, or it was just Antigen faking the test results, and he goes, that works too.
That too. That could be it.
It's both.
Here, we're the silver.
Yeah, he's a little crazy, but he's got heart.
But yeah, it's in the right place though.
So yeah, they show up for the big final showdown. She kicks a lot of lichen trash.
Yep.
I actually have a number for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
So this movie is definitively Celine's highest kill count in the franchise in terms of numbers that she kills on her own.
Yeah.
So if you count lichens and vampires, Celine kills a total of 71 people in this movie.
Holy, she's doing work.
She's putting in the work.
Yeah.
And, like, there's a huge bunch of it that's at the beginning of the movie, and a lot of it right here at the end, as she's just mowing down lichens left and right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that there's any highlights to hit, really, because it's a lot of just cannon fodder lichens. The cannon fodder lichens distract her long enough that they are able to get Eve into a van, and they're, like, trying to get out of there. So Detective Sebastian has to intervene himself and make the van... No, he doesn't make the van crash. He slows it down, so Celine can show up and crash the van. At that point, Quint shows up and Uber werewolf's out, and he and Celine face down. And then, yeah, friggin' Dr. Lane, who is also a vampire, mentions earlier in the movie that he started using the steroid shots on himself.
Yeah.
So he roids out into werewolf form a little bit, and he is like, he beats up Detective Sebastian bad.
Yeah.
Like, you and I were both like,
Come
okay.
on, man.
Yeah, you and I were both like, okay, new friend, now it's time for the new friend to die.
Yep.
And just getting brutally murdered by the villain. But no, before he can kill Sebastian, Eve transforms into little hybrid Eve.
Yep.
And they duke it out, and it's a pretty intense fight.
It is.
And might honestly be the cooler of the two because it's the one that relies more on practical effects.
Right.
There's also the gnarly thing of she keeps ripping off his face.
Uh-huh.
So you see his skull, and then it kind of starts healing, and then she like rips it off again. So he has this really cool like werewolf transform design where like his face is ripped off and you see his skull. It's gnarly and really cool looking.
Yeah.
Oh, and during all of this, like more Lycans start running into the parking compound, and Detective Sebastian is like knocked out at this point. He's down for the count.
Mm-hmm.
Eve is distracted, and Celine is distracted, and you're like, oh no, what are they going to do about all these extra guys? Da 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 da. David's back.
But bang with a shotgun.
And by the way, this is what we were talking about earlier. This is proof that he's evolved because there is actually sunlight shining into the parking structure.
Yeah, doesn't hurt him.
And he's totally fine. So he got there in broad daylight.
Yeah.
I have another factoid about this, if you're ready.
Oh, yes.
So in the filming script, actually, Theo James's last scene was supposed to be Celine restarting his heart.
Oh, wow.
But Theo James gave such a terrific performance and was so good in his stunt work that the filmmakers decided he should be a part of the last battle as well.
That's awesome.
That might also be why spoiler alert, I do know he's in Blood Wars.
Oh, okay.
Theo James is.
Yeah.
So he might have not supposed to been in that one, but they might have just liked him so much that they decided to bring him back.
Good for you, man. Good for
you. So good for Theo James.
Yeah.
So he gets to show up, and obviously he doesn't have quite as much going on as Celine and Eve because he was thrown in at the last minute.
Yeah.
And you can tell a little bit that he was thrown in at the last minute because he doesn't get to show off his cool evolved vampire powers very much. But he gets to show up, he gets to kick some trash, and he gets to be a part of the end battle. So just good for him.
Yeah.
Right. So Eve wins first.
Yes, Eve wins her battle first. She ends up getting herself in a good position, and then she straight up just rips Dr. Lane's throat and part of his spine right out of his body.
Rips like a good 4 or 5. What are those called? Vertebrae. Yeah. She rips it. She rips a good 4 or 5 vertebrae out of his spine.
Yep.
Yeah. So he is paralyzed and just sits there and bleeds out. It's
brutal.
It's brutal and kind of awesome. Again, like the villains all get like really nasty deaths, and I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
And the effects of his death were actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Because like the actress playing Eve, India Isley is her name.
Oh, cool.
She had something physical. She had an actual physical like fake vertebra that she was holding on to.
Oh,
you can see. All of the stuff in him seemed to be CGI, but it was him like lying there and acting. There was just like a CGI like ripped out throat effect, but even it looked great.
Looked really good.
So that death was gnarly and awesome. And then of course, Celine outsmarts Quint, realizing that he heals instantly.
Yep. Yeah. So basically, she runs into a hallway. Quint cannot get in because he's such a big just a huge animal, so he has to revert back to human form. And then Celine kind of plays it off that she's very weak and is really bad and banged up. And then while he's going after her, she ends up just grabbing inside of him real quick And, you know, he makes the comment like, oh, well, that didn't really do you any good. Like, I heal instantly. But little did we know, she throws the pin to a silver grenade that she just put inside of him.
She just punched a silver grenade inside of it, dude.
Yep. So she walks out, and he ends up just becoming chum when the thing goes off inside of him.
Yeah, it's gnarly.
It is. Pretty nasty, but pretty satisfying.
Yeah. Not as satisfying as Dr. Lane's death because
No.
the effects were not nearly as good.
Yeah.
Also, he was sort of like, he may have been the bigger bad, like physically, but he was the secondary antagonist, clearly, of the
For
movie.
sure.
Dr.
Yeah.
Lane was much more the villain.
Yeah.
We skipped over one important detail, which is when she's fighting all of the lichen fodder in Antigen, she stumbles into a lab where she finds Michael
Yes.
frozen in a cryogenic chamber.
Yes.
And we laughed really hard because at the beginning, right, Eve goes, like, deactivates everything, like, turns off the computer so that Celine can thaw out. How does Celine decide to thaw out Michael? She shoots the tank so the cold air leaks out. As if a cryogenic freezer works the same way a fridge works, where if you leave the door open, all the cold gets out and everything inside the fridge heats up.
Yep.
Not exactly the same thing, but it works. Detective Sebastian is alive, and he basically says, I'm going to give you guys time to get away. I'm going to put him on a false trail, but you guys got to get out of here. And Eve starts to have visions where she sees through Michael's eyes, and they run up to the roof, and they gaze off into the distance. Eve, Celine, and David presumably will start the next movie searching for Michael, and that is where this movie ends.
Yes. So, yeah, some pretty good times.
So that's the movie.
That is the movie. That is the overview of Underworld Awakening.
So, all right. Let's get to the facts, brother.
Fact.
So, fact. This movie had over 10 different drafts of the script.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And over 11 different people. Or no, half a dozen different screenwriters who at various points contributed things to the script. Only 4 people ended up getting screenwriting credit.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Len Wiseman, the director who also had story writing credits in the first 3. We have John Halvin. We have J. Michael Straczynski. And we have Allison Burnett. I would say congratulations to the first female writer to work on a Underworld movie. Yeah. But Allison Burnett is a man.
Oh, okay. Well.
So this is the first movie we've covered that was not written by Danny McBride. The other Danny McBride. The lesser Danny McBride. So this one was written by, like 5 or 6 different people, but only those 4 people got final credit on the actual screenplay. This is also the first movie we've covered that Len Wiseman did not direct.
Yes,
he did help write it. He did produce it. But this one was directed. I do not know how to pronounce their name. I do believe that they are Swedish directors, and I'm very sorry that I'm going to mispronounce their names right now. But Mans Marland and Bjorn Stein were the directors of this one. Oh, cool. Credited as Marland and Stein.
Very nice.
Cinematography, which, again, cinematography on an Underworld movie. This one, actually, you can take a little bit more credit for cinematography than some of the others, but still.
Yeah.
But cinematography credit goes to Scott Keevan. And then music, we have Paul Haslinger, who, if memory serves, did the music on the first Underworld movie.
I believe so, yeah.
He did better this time around.
He did, yeah.
That being said, I'm still inclined to think that Marco Beltrami's shadow looms large over this franchise.
It's true. Big shoes to fill.
And I'm not sure Paul Haslinger was up to the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the guy that did the first Underworld.
Okay.
So, yeah, this one was a little bit less of, random songs taken from the radio and we call it a soundtrack.
Yep.
But it the soundtrack wasn't noteworthy like Beltrami's was. It didn't stick out to us.
No.
Righto. Can you guess what this movie's budget was?
What, 40 mil?
Ooh.
Much higher?
It actually had a higher budget than Underworld Evolution.
Oh, for real? Okay.
For real.
So, let's go. Oh, I don't know. Maybe 60 mil? Jeez, boy. Okay, let's... $80 million.
Overshot. $70 million.
Okay.
Approximately. And you're correct to not assume that. Because, yeah, it does not feel like it had that kind of money.
No.
But again, with these movies, there's a lot of money is being poured in, and it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Do you want to guess how much this movie grossed at the box office?
Oh, 80 million.
No. According to my research, this is the first Underworld movie we've covered that actually did not earn back its budget.
Oh, shoot.
So it actually grossed approximately $62 million at the box office, which was apparently still good enough that they got to make
another one.
Yeah. And good enough that they're still making yet another one because they have a sixth one in the works, which we mentioned briefly last time.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. At this point, it might be a series of diminishing returns, which is actually unfortunate because this is one of the stronger entries.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, let's do that right now. So this has an IMDb rating of 6.4 out of 10.
Okay.
How would you rate this?
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, I gave the first one a 6.5. This one I liked quite a bit more. I'd probably give it 6.7.
Yeah, so I went back and reviewed. I gave the first Underworld a 6.2. I'm going to go right there with you. I'm going to give this one a 6.7.
Yeah.
This is my favorite one we've covered so far.
For sure.
And again, I think it just has a lot to do with the fact that it feels more focused. It's sleeker.
Yeah.
I like that it started to wipe the slate clean. Like I said, I don't think it took it far enough.
Yeah.
But tonally, it was something new. It was a leaner movie, and I'm all in favor of a leaner movie.
For sure, especially an Underworld movie.
Yeah, like they were just starting to get bogged down by timelines and histories, and this one was focused on the present, which I appreciated.
For sure.
Things that bothered you about the movie?
Yeah, like was what was brought up. Some of the inconsistency of the effects kind of was for me like not so much something I liked. Kate Beckinsale's costume again to me was something
I wish they'd given it an update.
Yeah, I mean, and just giving it a practical use other than just trying to be eye candy and trying to be marketing, to put something on the billboard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those are probably my biggest things that I didn't like about the movie.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about. I have no issue with the concept of, like, the lichen steroids and the uber lichen.
Yeah.
But I do think it's silly that their uber lichen didn't have powers that, like, they decided the way to show their uber lichen was more powerful than an average lichen was to make him like 30 feet tall.
Yeah.
I thought that was really silly.
That's true.
I would have much preferred that we had a clean, like, practical effects approach to the uber lichen. Maybe something like William, just a really cool special design.
Yeah.
And then we were shown that he was more powerful, as opposed to the filmmakers thinking, oh, obviously he's more powerful because he's 30 feet tall. Like,
yeah, he's a lot bigger.
So that felt really silly to me. That being said, it was only really when I stopped and like thought about it that I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I was mostly okay with it. Again, some of the violence in this movie is a little more disturbing mostly just the violence we see done against humans because it's
Yeah.
weirdly out of place in this franchise.
Yeah.
I do think the script the script was stronger than Evolution's.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it was as strong as the original script, but it did, like I said, it felt more streamlined. So in terms of like the actual dialogue and how characters communicated, not as strong as the first one, but in terms of story, stronger than the first, I think. Uh, so yeah, so those are some things that are wrong with the movie. We stated a lot that we liked with the movie. The practical effects were all really solid.
Oh, for sure.
I wish that they'd done more practical effects.
Yeah.
I do think this movie got a little bogged down in a couple of details, but given this franchise's track record, it felt like a breath of fresh air. If it had been in a different franchise, I would have noticed a lot more when it got bogged down by certain ideas.
Right.
Oh, you know what? Something really nice. We do have gratuitous nude Kate Beckinsale, but it's obscured. You don't see anything, and she immediately puts on her outfit again.
Yeah.
Other than that, no sex or nudity in this movie.
It's true.
Which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
Especially coming off Evolution, which, like I said, I was almost uncomfortable after watching the movie and learning about like all of the stuff behind the scenes with like the sex and nude scenes.
Yep.
That I was like, it really left a sour taste in my mouth. So to have this one kind of wipe the slate clean there was good. I really liked Eve. I thought she was a great character and she was very interesting to follow. I wish they hadn't included Michael at all.
Yeah.
If they were just going to do weird, awkward CGI Scott Speedman, I wish we just hadn't seen Michael in the movie. As a matter of fact, it might have been a better movie if it starts with her waking up out of cryo freeze. And instead of her like going into a freeze chamber and seeing CGI Scott Speedman at the end, she just sees on a computer system that Michael's somewhere in the system and she deactivates his cryo freeze chamber that way.
Yeah.
I would have preferred that we just don't see any sign of Michael.
That's a fair point, yeah.
Especially if he's not going to be a presence in the movie really at all. Showing him for a few seconds at a time in awful PS4 CGI. I just wish they hadn't. I wish they'd avoided it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know. Other than that, maybe my only complaint is I feel like Charles Dance might be a little underutilized in this movie.
He's great. Hopefully
he makes a return in Blood Wars. I don't actually know if he's in it or not.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see a little more from him because he's a great actor and he was a little underutilized in this movie.
For sure.
Other than that, I don't know. That might be it. Oh, there was a really funny... I didn't bring this up when we were going through the movie, but the scene where she restarts David's heart, there's a close-up of her face, there's a close-up of Charles Dance's face, and then there's a close-up of some random guy who has no name. We've never seen him before, but for some reason we need a close-up shot of his reaction to her restarting David's heart. For some reason that's important.
I just tend the livestock around here.
Like, what's she doing?
Is that a vampire?
So for some reason there's a random shot of that guy.
Yeah.
And that made me laugh. It reminded me of the push it of Michael Sheen in the first one. You know, the... but yeah, really solid. I'm actually, like, looking forward to... Like, after Evolution, I was kind of like, do we want to keep doing these movies?
Yeah.
But this was a breath of fresh air, and I'm looking forward to watching Blood Wars.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm excited to see more Katie Becks. I'm excited to see more Eve. I'm definitely excited to see more David.
Oh, for sure.
He was a great addition to the franchise, and the filmmakers really got lucky getting Theo James.
Absolutely.
He's great. I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
That might be it. Oh, ranking the Underworld movies. We were going to be doing that.
Yes. In my opinion, I would say of the three that we've watched, the first one is probably number one for me. Awakening, the one that we just watched, is probably number 2, and then Evolution takes the last spot.
Okay. If I look at it purely objectively, I'm actually going to say this one will probably take the number 1 spot for me. I'll give the original number 2, and I'll give Evolution number 3.
Fair enough.
But again, like, I very much see where you're coming from. I could easily put the original in the number 1 spot still. That's this movie. I think that's it. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
Yeah, that's about it. That's all for me.
I feel like we did it. Gave you a good summary of why you might like the movie and why you might not like the movie.
Yeah.
We didn't. Would you recommend this movie? This is the first one in this movie that I'd say. The other movies we were kind of like, well, it's up to you. This is the first movie I'd say, you know what? Go ahead, watch it.
Yeah.
Why not?
I mean, thanks to the flashback and the voiceover. You know, if you haven't caught those other ones, you can jump in on this one.
And if you've watched the other videos we've done, jump in anyway. We've covered it all. We have a whiteboard. We have a whiteboard. What do you want?
We know stuff.
What do you want? What do you want? Come on. Think about it. What do you want? No, what do you want?
Let us know.
Let us know. Let us know in the comments. Oh, that's a good point.
Yes.
You can reach us Twitter @uidiocracy, Facebook.com/underqualifiedidiots, underqualifiedidiots@gmail.com. This is an Underqualified Idiocracy presented podcast. So We're still a part of that family.
Yep.
You can comment on the video on YouTube. Talk to us. Let us know. We want to hear what you think about these movies. Whether we're insane, whether we're right, whether we're wrong. Or if you just want to, like, tell us about how quarantine's going for you. Just reach out. We want to hear from you.
For sure.
So that is where we'll end it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Stay safe, and we'll come back at you with another film.
Stay so healthy. Stay so healthy.